I'm Dave Dinkle, and I'm going to talk about how to use what I call the 6x6 strategy to find all the motivated sellers you can handle. So frankly, the first six in this equation that I have, so to speak, are what are the most profitable types of deals. Sounds pretty simple, but it changes year by year. But here's the ones. Remember, I do hundreds and hundreds of closings a year, and I get a chance to look over the shoulders of my students, my partners, myself, other investors who are using transactional funding, and I get to see where their deals come from. Now, I don't ask them. I don't say to them, by the way, John, where did you get this deal? How did you get this deal? I don't intrude on what they do. But I can tell from the closing statement a lot about where the deal came from. So number one is probates. And that typically is number one year in and year out. Number two is raw land. What's interesting about raw land is it normally comes into being a focus for investors as market values get higher and higher, typically near the top of a market, mostly because they're inexpensive to put under contract. Don't need large deposits, longer periods. You don't get an inspection period. You get a due diligence period, which can be 90 days or longer. I love vacant properties. For whatever reason, Elvis has left the house, that property is vacant. Combine that with some of the other stacked filters I'm going to show you, and those are highly profitable deals. Tax deeds. Now, we talk about pre-sales in what I do, not buying tax deeds. Yes, you can go down, nobody else bids on it, you get something for very inexpensive, knocks off mortgages and everything else, great. Except the real money is in the pre-sales. 5 is expired listings. There are plenty of realtors who make extensive livings. Almost every realtor has a focus on expired listings. And he calls up and basically says, I know the other guy that had the listing and I have a better deal. I have all these marketing features and so on and so forth. So expired listings are in there. And what you need to do as an investor is say, by the way, I understand your realtor couldn't sell it for you, but I'm the buyer. I'm the guy that actually comes to closing with money. And you never call yourself an investor because that's like bottom feeders. People who are not even well-meaning but do not understand this think that we steal deals from people. They could get a lot more money elsewhere. The reality is if they could get a lot more money elsewhere, they would have gotten it already. We solve problems. That's what realtors say. But the only feature they have is to list it on the MLS. And if you can't find buyers, even in markets that are so hot you can't get near them, then what do you have? You have a pre-tax deed sale next Thursday. The realtor says, I know we can sell it, and he doesn't. You lose the house. You're going to be homeless in some cases, and I've seen that happen. We solve problems. And the last one, believe it or not, is short sales, but not just any short sales. They have to be done by a person that's knowledgeable and understands short sales for investors. The most short sales that are done by associates of real estate investors whose only view is let's just get an approval on it, list it on the MLS and make a commission. That's not what we do. We have to take into account the condition of the property, what are the code violations, chain of title issues, whatever, and get a deep discount below market value. And if you're thinking to yourself, gee, you can't get deep discounts on anything, you're dead wrong. It's because you haven't been doing it. You don't believe you can do it, so you don't believe anybody else can do it. That's stinking thinking. So what I want to do is, it says here in raw land, example to follow, and I'm going to show you an example. This is typically how I cut the HUDs in half so you can see them. This is raw land. There's the purchase price, $25,000. How big was the tract? It doesn't matter. What matters is he had to pay $25,000 for it. This is the bottom half of the HUD. No earnest money deposit. I go over it and over it in my videos. There's actually 4 ways to do it, but there it is, no earnest money deposit. That's how much money he needed to do the transaction. He had no money, so he couldn't put up an earnest money deposit, so I showed him how not to be able to have to put up an earnest money deposit. This is the second HUD, the B to C, top half, sold it for $145,000. This is the bottom half. What do you see here? No earnest money deposit. Hey, this isn't how it's supposed to work. From your end buyer, you're supposed to get it somewhere between 2 and 5 times whatever you put up. Well, in theory, he put up 0, so 0 times 2 or 5 is still 0. But if your end buyer doesn't close, you're not going to make any money getting his earnest money deposit. But 2 things here. There's the payback to me as a transactional funder, and there's the net profit, $116,144.25. He said to me when I did this with him, that's more than he made at his job in 3 years. So let's now talk about what are the top 6 ways to get the deals. I showed you the deals. Now we're going to talk about the top 6 ways to find them. Driving for dollars has probably been the #1 way to get deals for the last 30 years, maybe 50 years. Bandit signs. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, man, those are illegal, it's a this, it's a that, blah, blah. I have a video that I put up recently, and the student is netting upper six figures, wholesaling, and he has two ways of getting deals. If you listen to him, you'll hear him say driving for dollars and bandit signs. But Dave, they're illegal. Yeah, they're illegal. It depends on where you put them. That's what's important, not what kind of sign it is. If you go past an intersection, I buy houses cash, they're on the poles, they're on the ground, they're everywhere you see them, those are illegal. But there's places to put them that are better. Door knocking, it's probably the hardest thing people do. But I used to say that if you didn't know anything about real estate investing and you then were picked up and taken to a new city, drop by parachute into this city, what's the fastest way to get a deal? That's it. Door knocking, cold calling. This is hard for people, and to overcome that hardness, and I say hardness because it's mostly rejection, they hire virtual assistants to do it. And the capability of the virtual assistants is probably 5% of what the investor actually could do. But it's an emotional thing that keeps him from making the cold calls. The other thing, of course, is direct mail. It goes in cycles, works sometimes, doesn't work other times. And most every property gets a lot of them. But the real money is not in the mail piece. It's in following up on the mail piece. Now listen to this, whether you mail it or not. And finally, texting. Now, texting has some real emotional ups and downs. If you're going to do texting, I just remind you of my student who got a $9 million potential fine. That was able to be negotiated down to not very much. But if you're going to do texting, make sure that you not only have it filtered for the do not call list, but most importantly, for litigious individuals. And then I would sort it a second time with a different sort for litigious individuals, because that's the people, attorneys, that get on everybody's list and then they sue you. They do a class action lawsuit. So be very, very careful. And remember, the people that are selling you the list don't have any responsibility. You're the one that does the texting. So next I want to look at the big change in the industry that's happened in about the last 4 or 5 years. And I can say that maybe I've had some part to do with that because I've focused on trying to get licensed agents, realtors, into being wholesalers. And that's simply being a realtor and offering to list a property as well as being an investor buyer. You wear two hats, and instead of walking away with a 2.5% or 3%, or on a big day a 6% commission, you can literally walk away with anywhere from 20 to 40% profit on the property, legally, ethically, and morally, if you do it right. So here's another example, driving for dollars. I just mentioned it, $950,000 purchase price. Oh, wait a minute, David, what are you talking about? $950,000? Yeah, this is a no money transaction. You'll see it in a second. $45,000 earnest money deposit. Oh, Dave, wait a minute. You just said it's no money. That's right. And the way he got that $45,000, he asked me, he said, do you want to put up $45,000, split the deal with me? I said, no, I don't do earnest money deposits, but I'll tell you how to get it. And I did. And he got the $45,000 from someone else. There's what I funded. I sent in $918,938.69. So because he borrowed the $45,000 and I put up the $918, this is a no money transaction. Here's the B2C HUD top half. There he sold it, $1.3 million. Is that a giant profit? It's not as giant as I have seen on other $1 million purchases, but it's not bad, guys. It's really not bad. $45,000 earnest money deposit from the end buyer. Remember on the HUD statement, I said to you everything on the left side is the buyer side. And now on the B2C, the seller, which is the investor, is on this side. So here's the bottom line. Paid me back my transactional funding. There's his net profit. Shows $301,000, but remember, he borrowed $45,000 to put up, so that's included in the $301,000. So his net profit on the transaction was $250,000. How long does it take you to make $250,000? I don't know. That could be 6 months, could be 6 years. But this person, along with other investors, has the opportunity to make money on a consistent basis if you're consistent, persistent, and you have somebody looking over your shoulder, not only to keep you out of trouble, but also to coach you through what's going on out there. So what are stacked filters? I mentioned them a minute or so ago because you just don't look for probates, for example. But properties can be researched by using a number of filters. At least you can use one of these or you can use a number of these. And I have a student who's brilliant. It's his biggest handicap. He's very bright. It took him 6 months to get his first deal. And he struggled because his very analytical mind was coming up all the time with, I need to do that, I need to do that. I said to him one day, just stop it. Dumb it down. Because he came to me and he said, I stacked the filters. And normally where you'd use 5, I found that I could use 23 stacked filters to find the most motivated seller. I said, okay, so what did that show you? Well, in the county that he was looking at, there was 3,000 REOs, real estate owned properties that were for sale. But when he stacked his filters using his own filtering mechanism, that took it down to 3. All of those other ones were going to be sold, and so were his 3. But how long could he wait for them? Once he realized you don't need a college education to do this, I got to stop it, thinking about it, and just do it. He got a deal within 2 weeks, and he did so very well. He now only does hard money loans, and he splits deals with his own students. So you can, again, research these properties looking for motivated sellers by looking for these things: vacant, non-owner occupied, pre-foreclosure, pre-tax deed sales. And again, I say pre-tax deed sales, not tax deeds, not tax certificates, but pre-tax deed sales, involuntary liens, listed or not listed, days on market, equity. If you're looking at a motivated seller and you're looking at his property and it doesn't have equity in it, then you're going to have to do a short sale. It's very simple. And you can look for REOs and short sale deals. And of course, I mentioned probates before. And why are they at the bottom of the list? For no other reason other than I put them at the bottom of the list. Don't overthink it. So what I like the most is vacant, non-owner occupied. As I said before, Elvis has left the house. There's a reason he's not there. Now, you can say to me, well, it may be a summer house or it may be a condo in the winter. We don't do condos. And if it's a single family home, yes, it may be a vacation home. But you got to stack that with other things. Here they go. Pre-foreclosure, pre-tax deed sale. Listed or not listed. So any of the stack filters that I show you here can be looked at for both listed properties and unlisted. If you're of the belief that you can't do listed properties because everybody buys all of them as soon as they come out, keep thinking that fallacy and don't do listed properties. You're wrong, but I'm not going to try and change your mind. Go to non-listed properties. That's where most of the investors are rummaging around to try and get deals. Your competition is much higher on not listed. Dave, why would I do listed? The reason they're listed is because the seller is motivated. How motivated? He might be a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10, or he might be 10. You can find that out by sorting these beforehand and then sticking listing on there to find out where he is. Equity. Again, I mentioned it earlier. If it doesn't have equity in it or you can't create equity in it, you don't do it. And of course, probates. So here is what I'm going to show you in a second. Now, you can also sort for the usual stuff, and that's beds, bath, living. All of that stuff doesn't matter. Frankly, if you're in the thought process, well, it has to be a 3-2 or it won't sell, stop it. Listen to this. I saw a 3-2 come through the system, 490 square feet for the entire 3-2. That's like a large bedroom. How do you get 3 bedrooms? You have to literally stand to go to sleep. Somebody bought it. Don't overthink this and say, put yourself in a corner, 2-1s don't sell. It has to be a 4-2, 3-2. It has to have a garage. Stop it. You're not the one buying it. All you're doing is putting it under contract and reselling it. Let the other guys sort out what the repair costs are. You don't have to do that. And I suggest you don't do it, because if they ever come back to you and say, you told me it's going to be about $20,000, turned out to be $80,000, I'm going to sue you because I lost money. Let them do it. They're going to do it anyway. You're not doing them a favor, and you're especially not doing yourself a favor. So here's an example. Stack filter, pre-probates. I'm going to show you an example to follow. Now, what is a pre-probate? A true pre-probate means the probate itself has not been filed with the court to resolve the probate and to determine who gets what proportional amount of the property. So in pre-probates, if you can sort through your software system, the pre-probates do not have an attorney attached to them. What's the benefit? Well, if an attorney is attached to him, typically the attorney can be a listing agent because he doesn't have to pass the test the realtors do. He's granted it gratis from the state. He has a girlfriend, a wife, a boyfriend, or whatever else who's a realtor. What does he do? He gives them the listing. So what you have is a listed probate property. Non-owner occupied. Now remember, we're stacking these filters. So we have a probate, non-owner occupied. And you're thinking, well, Dave, has to be non-owner occupied because the person died. No, there may be a spouse and the spouse has moved out. But whatever it means in terms of whether there was a spouse or not a spouse, last remainder man, it's non-owner occupied, meaning it's vacant. And if it's vacant, it means probably the kids live in another state or another area, and it's more of a burden to them to maintain it, so on and so forth. Most of them want cash. Pre-foreclosure. Oh, normally in a probate, nobody wants to put any money into it, especially if you have a reverse mortgage. What good is it to put money in because they're not going to accept it? They were paying you checks. And now, because the person on the mortgage passed, it's in pre-foreclosure. Pre-tax deed sale. Oh yeah, they forgot to pay the taxes too. So it's going to be lost, and the heirs, the beneficiaries, are not going to get anything out of it. It's not listed. Again, it's not listed because it's pre-probate. They can't really be listed if there's not a personal representative, an executor, executrix, or whatever else. And finally, equity. Does it have equity or not? If it doesn't, we talked about short sales. And we're going to get into, not in this conversation, but how do you do a short sale on a reverse mortgage? Can it be done? Those are insured. They don't have to take any less money. They're going to get their money back. But many of them do not have any mortgage on them. So those 6 filters you see will generate specifically motivated sellers who want out. Now, are they ready to get out when you need them to get out? Not necessarily. Follow-up is the key. So here is the top half of a pre-probate, and my student paid $75,000 for this. Bottom half, zero earnest money deposit. As I've said so many times before, I put up $74,700. That's because the closing agent decided that's what I should put up instead of putting up 100% of what was due from the borrower on line 303 on the bottom down here. So what does that mean? That's pretty simple. He walked away with a check for $13.51. I can't tell you how annoying this is. What they tried to do is balance the mortgage amount, filing fees, and other. I didn't want a mortgage. I didn't need it. I closed the same day. But they figured if you want a title policy for a lender, then you have to have a mortgage. I don't want a title policy. I don't want a mortgage. Nonetheless, I just said to my student, just take the check for $13.51. I don't want to confuse them. I'd rather be happy than right. So let the closing agent think they're the ones that are right. So there's what I put up, $74,700. Here's the B2C HUD. Now he's selling the property. He's the investor. He really does own the property because I paid for it. Sold it for $159,000. Here's the second page. The end buyer, remember the buyer's on the left side. So now on the B2C HUD, this is your end buyer. Put up an earnest money deposit of $5,000. Great. That means if my student doesn't close because the end buyer says, I changed my mind, he's going to get that $5,000. Even if he has to go to mediation, worst case, he'll get half of it. But he hasn't put up any on the first leg. So he's going to make money even if he doesn't close. There I am being paid back. And finally, that's the net profit, $76,733.32. Do me a personal favor. Give me a like down below and share, and most importantly, subscribe, because I have a lot of great information that will help you get more deals and help you make more money on the deals that you get. So I want to say this to you because it's very important. Your power as an investor lies in your mastering 2 important areas. I tell students this all the time. They don't get it initially. If you listen to my videos with interviews I've done with students, you'll hear it time and time again. This may not be logical, but all the things you're spending time on learning, after repaired value, cap rate calculations, blah, 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 they're not as important as 2 things. Making low offers and following up until one of 2 things can happen. You're the last man or woman standing and you've just made a chunk of change, or somebody else has paid too much and you can't compete with that. And the second thing is your buyer's list. If you simply focus on building a buyer's list from the start and you understand how to do that, you never need to put up an earnest money deposit. You don't have to go out and look at houses. You can sell other guys' deal or gals' deals. I have students who started out doing wholesaling. They went into rehabbing. They started to accumulate properties, but as I asked them to do, frankly, keep wholesaling. As they kept wholesaling and building their buyer's list, they realized, fixing and flipping is such a pain and I don't make any more money than I do wholesaling. They built great buyer's lists, and now they don't do any kind of flipping. They don't accumulate rental properties. They simply sell other people's deals, and they do a net 6-figure a month or more. And you can do that. How big a buyer's list do you need? You'll hear me talk to students. They'll mention the size of their buyer's list in some of the videos. You need 350 actual people who have bought properties before you put them on your list to be able to regularly sell properties you get under contract. And if you're going to do it right, you probably need about 1,000 to start selling other people's properties. But remember, the follow-up is where the money is. Your buyer's list is where your power is. And I ask that question again. Why not you? There's no reason. If you're not doing it, you may not believe it, but it's by choice. You're not making the right choices.